AM, weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Raucous Caucus. This is Mark Levine. I am here with
Garland Nixon.
And we are talking about, well, everything under the sun. You're welcome to call in 202-889-9797 or 888-488-MARK. If you're listening on the stream, 888-488-6275. We were talking about income inequality and the fact that our House isn't very democratic. I want to move on now to Garland's topic. Garland, you wanted to talk about, I guess, drones in America. Tell us about that.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about what Eric Holder, I talked about on my radio show the other night, and I'll relate a little bit of that to you, and we'll talk about it. So what happened? Rand Paul basically asked the Justice Department, he asked Eric Holder whether the Justice Department, whether he believed that President Obama had the legal authority to order a targeted strike against an American citizen located within the United States. Now, you notice he said a targeted strike. He did not limit it to drones. People say drones. He didn't limit it to drones.
Right.
He said a targeted strike in America.
Meaning a plane could drop a bomb on, I guess, the people in Waco who are holed up with guns.
Theoretically, it could be a tank round.
Right.
Strike is a strike. You know what I mean? I mean, if it could be whatever. Basically, when he says a targeted strike, when you send in SEAL Team 6 to kill somebody.
Isn't that what we did to Chris Dorner, the renegade Los Angeles Police Department officer?
Right. So,
held up in a cabin.
And people went berserk over what Eric Holder said, and on both the left and the right, and I disagreed with a lot of people, and we're going to talk about why. So, what did Holder say? He said, now, number one, he rejected the use of military force where well-established law enforcement authorities in this country provide the best means for incapacitating a terrorist attack. So he said, if the cops can do it, then we don't need to do it. The federal government, the military doesn't need to. First and foremost, this is the cops' job, right? He said, but in theory, it would be legal for the president to order such an attack under certain circumstances. So as a result, what happens? There is an incorrect interpretation of that. Number one, a lot of people on the left and right said, he's saying that the government can order drone strikes in America. That's not what he said. He said that, he said, and I quote, "It is possible, I suppose, to imagine an extraordinary circumstance in which it would," listen to this, extraordinary circumstance, let's start with that, in which it would be necessary and appropriate under the Constitution and applicable laws of the United States for the president to authorize the military to use lethal force within the territory of the United States. Now, anyone who thinks that the president can't or hasn't been able to, or that any president couldn't authorize the use of lethal military force in the United States, here's what I advise you to do. Drive over to the nearest military base, and when you get to the entrance, when the MPs say to you, stop and show me ID, say, I'm not showing you ID, and keep on driving. And you will
see military force.
The military already has the authority to use military force because they're going to fill you full of holes.
And you know what? I would. You gave a present day example. I would give an example from 230 years ago when our first president, George Washington, faced a number of farmers in western Massachusetts who did not want to pay their whiskey taxes. It's called the Whiskey Rebellion.
Right.
And what did he do? He sent in the military to put down these farmers. He did a targeted strike against American citizens, and he used the military to do it, to put down this rebellion of Americans that didn't want to pay their whiskey taxes. So it can happen today, and it can also happen in the 1790s.
Now, I'm going to add this. Not only should the president, because remember, he said, he quantified, he said, number one, under extraordinary circumstances. He said, I can imagine circumstances, extraordinary circumstances. He even said it should be the cop's job first. Law enforcement should do it first. Now, let me throw this out. And it's funny because
I'm just going to give one more example, and that is of Abraham Lincoln. There was a certain difference of opinion between 1861 and 1865, where a whole bunch of Americans decided to rebel against the national government. Some of you may have heard of it. It's called the Civil War. More Americans died in it, frankly, than all our other wars put together. And what did Abraham Lincoln do? He used the military to target American citizens within the borders of the United States. And Lincoln is not seen as some renegade maybe John Wilkes Booth thought he was a tyrant, but the vast majority of Americans still revere him as a pretty good president today. So just wanted to throw those two examples out.
Let me give you another example. And I say not only does the president have the authority, not only have all presidents had the authority, they better have the authority. In fact, they will be negligent if they don't. So let me throw this out there. Let's just say you're driving down the road in a truck bomb and you're heading towards Calvert Cliff nuclear power plant. And we get the information, and the government knows it, and the cops say we can't get anywhere near that truck. That truck bomb will blow away. If they torch that truck bomb, it'll take out anything within 10 city blocks. So we can't get anywhere near it with a helicopter or or anything. We can't do it. Even if we come near it with a helicopter, we don't have any method of taking this truck out. And they call Patuxent River Air Force Base, and they say we got some drones that can take the truck out. Before it gets to Calvert Cliff's nuclear power plant and blows up one of the reactors and, nukes and, 3 Mile Island on steroids. Now, and I would say to people, would you say that the president should authorize a drone strike on that truck bomb to stop it from blowing up the nuclear power plant? Or should he say, well, we haven't read the guy's rights? The president, let him go. We'd be better off to allow this guy to take out a nuclear reactor and cause a nuclear meltdown than we would to use a drone. Here's what I say. Drone, Smoon, B-52, F-16, F-4, I don't care what you use. The president has a responsibility, has a duty based on his oath of office to protect the citizens of the United States. He better take that truck out with anything he has.
Okay, now, but Garnet, let's discuss the counter-argument, because there are people on the left and the right. Interestingly, they tend to be on the farther edges of both the left and the right who say, no, but wait a minute. This power can be abused. Richard Nixon, famously, broke into headquarters, looked through people's taxes. If we have a president now who can assassinate people at will, why can't that president take out his political opponents? Why can't the president say, we kill first and then later we call you a terrorist? I mean, we should have normally court processes. We should have warrants and things like that. What's to prevent, maybe not President Obama, but a renegade president from abusing this power? And that is a fair question.
It is a fair question, but it has nothing to do with what Eric Holder said. It's a different subject. It's saying, should the president have this power? Now, first of all, the first thing we have to acknowledge is this. Every president who has ever been president of the United States has had that power, and everyone who ever is president in the future or becomes president will have that power. So the idea that they will abuse the power, it's always going to be there, and there is no way that we should say to any president that if a truck bomb or if some American citizen is flying a plane full of dynamite into Calvert Cliff's nuclear power plant, that the president should not be able to stop him with any force necessary.
Okay, but I'll be very clear here, but you're talking about an imminent threat. That would be very, very clear. We're not talking about the leader of the mafia is sitting at a cafe and we can get him. In fact, Eric Holder was specifically asked that question. You've got, Osama bin Laden, and he's walked into the local McDonald's because we know Osama bin Laden loves those Big Macs. Despite his, he's dead now, but he specifically asked, could they take out somebody in a cafe? And he said no. They asked him if it was not an imminent threat, could he take them out? And he said no. It's very, very important that we make clear it's an imminent threat, because otherwise, what do? You go by the Constitution and you get a warrant out for somebody's arrest, and the police come in and they arrest the guy. We're talking only about an imminent threat. That's a real important point.
And that's my problem with what the discussion, both Rand Paul and a lot of people on the left and right. He particularly said we can't do that. But people on the left and right are arguing as though he didn't say that. He specifically said, because you have Rand Paul, well, I don't want to be in a Starbucks in San Francisco. Not that he'd ever be in a Starbucks in San Francisco, but I don't want to be in a Starbucks in San Francisco and have a drone strike kill me. When, in fact, Eric Holder specifically said we can't do that.
Right.
So,
right. So now the only issue that's left, though, is there are those that are arguing the government hasn't defined imminent threat in such a way. Although I think the words imminent threat are pretty clear. Imminent threat. But they say that that in the memo they've defined imminent threat to be not so imminent. And so that we can argue around the edges about that.
Right. But the fact of the matter is, imminent threat is subjective anyway. So can you define, if you specifically, legally define imminent threat, and something comes up that is clearly an imminent threat, but now you know how the law is, you look at it and say, holy moly, we never stopped to think that could happen. So we didn't put it in the law as an imminent threat. Yeah. What happens? Now, you're faced with something that clearly is an imminent threat, but it is not something that you specifically articulated and defined in the law. So now, if you act, you're acting outside of the law. If you don't act, they blow a nuclear power plant sky high.
The other thing is, if it happens in the United States of America, with our free press and our TV cameras and our iPhones that record everything, it's not like it's going to be done secretly, right? I mean, if the President of the United States orders a strike in Oregon or where else, I just said Oregon because that's where Terry is. Run, Terry, run! Right. But if they order a strike, we're going to know about it. And the ultimate way to police a renegade president is the same way we've always had it in the Constitution: impeachment. If the president's going out assassinating his or her political enemies and they start dying in cafes one after the other, I think we'll know about it, and I think we'll have the power to impeach such a renegade president. So there really still are checks and balances in the United States. And just the criticism in the press. Now remember, President Obama has never done this in the United States of America. He simply reserved his right to do it. Abraham Lincoln was certainly criticized.
Mark, when you say he reserves his right to do it, it's important to define what it is.
All right.
Because people are running forward saying that it means blowing up anybody anytime they want to, using a drone strike on the corner of 14th and U to take out everybody at Ben's Chili Bowl, when the fact of the matter is they specifically said they can't do that. See, this is the problem I have. They specifically said they can't do that. And the discussion is as though they specifically said they can do that. Number one. Number two, the only discussion is about drone strikes, as though and we need to talk about that also, as though drones were evil or they, we're assigning some sort of emotional intellect towards, to drones when it's nothing but a word, but we'll get to that in a second anyway. So I say, if you're going to have a discussion, have an honest discussion about what was said. And if the man said, under extraordinary circumstances, I can see an instance where it would be appropriate and necessary. And I ask people, do you disagree with that? And they would say yes. I'd say, what part of that statement do you disagree with? And they'd say, well, the government will use power to do that. I said, whoa. What part of that statement do you disagree with? I have yet to have anyone on the left say to me, I disagree with the part that says the government should be able to stop a truck bomb or a 747 from flying into Calvert Cliffs nuclear power plant. I think the government shouldn't be able to do that because there's an American citizen in the cockpit.
It's not just an American citizen, by the way. It's also American soil. There was a lot of discussion. We did kill, and let's be very clear. The President of the United States did order a drone strike on an American citizen. Anwar Alaki is his name. He was in Yemen. He's an American citizen. I think by birth. I think he was born here. He's also the leader of an Al-Qaeda cell in Yemen, and we do not have an extradition treaty with Yemen. There was no way that law enforcement could, by ordinary power, bring him to justice. Obviously, if he'd been in France or England or Canada or some country with which we have relations, we would rely on the French or Canadian or English authorities to pick him up and extradite him to the United States. And they took him out with a drone strike. So that is an American citizen. And you could argue it wasn't an imminent threat because while the guy's a terrorist and was certainly plotting to get us, I don't know that we knew a specific plan. Right. But within the American borders is a very, very different circumstance, and that's something that Obama has never done and certainly has no plans to do.
And that's my point, too. And I would say to people, when it comes to our drone policies overseas, I agree with you on most of the issues and most of the problems on the overseas drone strikes. Absolutely. I'm not, I'm against, blowing up a building where there either is or may be innocent people in it, and I think that we cause ourselves more problems than we solve with those drones by, all of the innocent people that we kill, as they call collateral damage, but they're really innocent people. So I'm 100% with that on foreign soil and even on American soil. But I want an honest discussion. And if you're going to say to me, I got a problem with what Eric Holder said and with the president being able to kill Americans, to order the military to kill Americans on American soil, then we have to have an honest discussion, and we have to acknowledge that every president has ever had it. And if you don't think so, if you don't think that the president can authorize lethal force, then all you need to do is drive to your near military base and try to drive on there without showing them ID. If you don't think they can do that, then all you have to do is try to blow through the gate at the local military, at the local nuclear power plant in your truck, and watch what happens when you get shot. So, in a true, honest discussion, we don't get away from, but the government will abuse their power. That's a different discussion, and I agree with that. But it's not the same as saying the government should never be able, or that Eric Holder's wrong for saying that there are, in fact, circumstances where the president better authorize the use of force.
There's an important distinction.
Separate discussion.
The important distinction between saying whether the president should have the power and whether the president should or is abusing the power.
How he should use the power.
Here's what I find most interesting. The left, at least, is consistent on this point. They were angry at Bush for doing these kinds of things. They're angry at Obama for doing these kinds of things. At least they're consistent on this point, and we can argue about the extent to which Bush or Obama are abusing the power with strikes overseas. The right, however, is laughably inconsistent. Rand Paul had his filibuster, and I believe that Rand Paul legitimately believes what he believes. I don't think, you could say he's grandstanding, and he is, but he legitimately, I think, opposes any president who does almost anything with the military.
I was about to say, he opposes any form of organized government.
Right, pretty much. Right. So he's pretty consistent. But Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republicans, the guy who never found anything Bush did that he ever opposed, who supported the Iraq War, who supported all the no-bid contracts to Halliburton, who supported Abu Ghraib. This is a guy who never said peep to anything in Bush's military policy. To see him support Rand Paul's filibuster against Obama doing much, much less than Bush did, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I got to give credit to the left. They've consistently opposed it all. The right, is just, Mitch McConnell, give me a break.
Well, Mitch McConnell and the right, they are very consistent. Anything that a Republican president does
is okay,
support,
right?
And anything that the Democrat does is wrong. So there is consistency, and it's a very hypocritical consistency,
right?
That demonstrates who they really are. But how about we say this? They're consistently hypocritical.
There you go. Let me say this though: I am glad we've had this debate. I am glad that actually some Democratic senators were insistent on, for example, the memo. We had Ron Wyden of Oregon, kind of a maverick, if you will, Democrat, but he insisted on getting a memo from the Justice Department about the drone strikes prior to approving John Brennan. And there are certainly those, and I'm glad we spelled it out. I'm glad Eric Holder was asked the question. I'm glad he spelled it out.
You're falling into the trap.
Am I?
Falling into the trap. You said drone strikes.
Well, it wasn't.
It was about the president having the authority to authorize lethal force on it was
in the United States.
Drone.
Okay, it wasn't limited to drones. I guess drones has this scary idea.
That's something else I got to say, and that is this. They had over at UDC the other day. They had protest about drones. I think that is mistaken. You see, I don't have a problem with drones. No problem with drones. A drone is just an unmanned aerial vehicle. Drones, big deal. They mean nothing. People are using this word drones, and it's like there's brain association.
Killer bees. Killer bees are called drones.
Means this. Now, here's the problem. You say to the government, I want these drones stopped. We got to stop these drones. No more drone strikes. And the president says, you don't want any more drone strikes? Yeah. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to ground all drones. And they say, hooray, we won. And the next day, what happened? There was a Tomahawk missile fired into an Afghan school that killed 5,000 children. And the government says to you, you told us to stop using drones. We told you we were going to use Tomahawk missiles, F-14, bunker buster missiles. We're going to use, artillery rounds.
But Garland, let me say this.
Missiles. We'll just fire them from helicopters.
Garland, if Terry were here, and Terry is sick today, so I got to give him a little bit of a voice. If Terry were here, he would say that he's opposed to drones for this reason. He thinks that when you go in with your little joystick in Atlanta and remotely control an airplane, on the other side of the globe, shooting down people in Afghanistan, that you are less likely to be as careful as a bomber in the air who's risking his or her own life to take out someone. I don't know that that's true. I maybe you would think that a person flying a plane over Afghanistan is scared because they could get shot down and be more likely to take aggressive action even if civilians are involved. And maybe some guy sitting very safely in Atlanta or NORAD or North Dakota, wherever they are, might actually have the calmness to say, you know what, I'm not going to shoot this terrorist who is walking by this school because they're not in fear for their life. But I do know Terry's argument, and I've heard it, and he basically says that there's something unfair to some extent about fighting a battle where you don't risk loss to your own life, and of course you cause tremendous damage to the other side. I just want you to address that.
I would make the point that then you don't understand military policy. Here's the problem. I don't have a problem with drones. A drone is a tool that is used to execute a policy. I have a problem with the policy. If you see, Terry obviously wouldn't understand this. When the order comes down, these are the coordinates for the strike. The person running this drone from Colorado does not have the ability to say, oh, no, General so-and-so, I'm not going to launch on the coordinates for this strike.
Right. It's the president's decision,
these are the coordinates,
ultimately.
And go shoot it.
Right.
And if they use a Tomahawk missile 1,100 miles away or whatever, they have the coordinates for a strike, they determine they're going to make the strike, and it doesn't matter what the person running, whichever vehicle it is, whichever aerial vehicle it is. So he would be mistaken because he would think that the individual pilot, if you want to call him that, of the drone has the leeway to say to his superiors, no, I will not launch the strike on the target that I've been ordered to launch. So I say,
well, they might.
We have to target the policy and say, I don't like the policy that does this, because you're targeting the tool for the policy. And as I've seen, I used to work in government, and when someone would say, we don't like the fact that you're using this tool, they would say, we'll give you what you want, we're not going to use that tool again. And then they just use a different tool.
Yeah, so I agree. You have to go after the policy, not the tool. I think, and I don't know, it's actually a fair question. We need to have, maybe I'll bring someone in on the Inside Scoop. We'll bring a military person in to ask the question. I do know that in the Israeli army, if they are ordered to do an attack and they see civilians, maybe they're attacking one of those rockets that flies across the border from Gaza and lands in villages in Israel. If they see civilians near the rocket launching, the individual attacking, the Air Force pilot, has the individual authority to not strike. In most circumstances, if they see civilians there. I hope that's our policy too. I hope that if we're out, if you're given the coordinates for a target, that the person that is manning the joystick or whomever would be able to say, you know what, I'm going to hit that target, but I'm going to wait 20 minutes because I see some people passing by. I hope they would have that.
Drones, and here's the thing about it. These drones have very, very powerful cameras that can zoom in from miles away.
So and hopefully they can circle around in the air a little bit and wait until the appropriate time. And even if the airstrike is ordered at 4 a.m., if they see some people walking past, they can wait till 4:10 a.m. or something like that.
So my point in all of this is, my issue is not with the drones. My issue is with the policy, and those who are protesting drones or just using the word drones or running around in fear of drones don't recognize that the drones are nothing more than a tool,
right.
And that if we ground all drones, they will simply use another tool to execute the policy. If you don't like the policy, argue against the policy. If you don't like the tool, then apparently you don't have any problem with the policy, because
right.
you can use another tool.
It's a fair point. Argue where the people controlling the weapons. It's not the weapons. It's although I can make an argument about guns, but we won't go there. That's all the time. That is different because it's individuals.
That would be different.
It's individuals, not a government.
There's a difference between a drone that has a nuclear missile on it and
right.
a drone that has a Hellfire missile.
There's also a difference between a drone controlled by the President of the United States, elected by the American people, and a drone controlled by Joe Crazy out there.
Right.
So that's the difference. Right.
So there are always degrees, whether you're using drones, what they have. The same with guns. Is it a 22 caliber single shot, or do you have a 100 shot? You know what I mean? So
yeah. Our time is up, though. I got to end this segment. The Raucous Caucus. It's 1 o'clock. Raucous Caucus is over. Thank you so much for your time, Garland. I appreciate it.
Right.
Very good discussion. Coming up next, the inside scoop on drug policy. You don't want to miss that. Coming up right after this.